When Daniel was 22, he thought he knew what sex drive meant. It was the restless energy that pulsed through him late at night, the way his mind wandered during lectures, the urgency that sometimes embarrassed him when he was sitting too close to someone he found attractive. It was a part of him as natural as hunger or thirst, something he barely thought about because it was always just there, simmering under the surface. That changed when he started antidepressants. Daniel had struggled with depression for years. He finally found the courage to see a doctor after one too many mornings spent unable to get out of bed, his phone filled with missed calls and unanswered messages. The doctor listened carefully, nodded, and prescribed a medication that promised to make life feel manageable again. At first, it worked. The heaviness in his chest lifted, colors seemed brighter, and the urge to stay in bed all day lessened. He started going to class again, laughing with friends, even cooking himself meals instead of living on instant noodles. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like maybe he was becoming himself again. But within a few weeks, he noticed something strange. The constant hum of desire that had always been a part of him went quiet. At first, he didn't mind. He was too relieved by the absence of despair. But soon, the absence grew impossible to ignore. He didn't feel like touching himself anymore, and when he tried, it was as if his body was no longer cooperating. His arousal came sluggishly, his erections weaker, and finishing became almost impossible. The first time it happened, he laughed it off, telling himself he was just tired. The second time, he grew nervous. By the fifth, he was staring at himself in the bathroom mirror, wondering if something inside him had broken. Masturbation had once been simple, almost automatic. Now it was a frustrating ritual. He would try for half an hour, his body responding halfway, but never fully. The edge of release dangled in front of him but refused to come. Instead of relief, he was left tense, aching, and embarrassed. He slammed his laptop shut more than once, swearing under his breath, angry at himself for not being able to do what had once been effortless. It wasn't just about release. It was about identity. Daniel felt like he had lost something essential to his sense of being a man. He avoided dating, worried that if he got close to someone, he'd be exposed as broken. How could he explain that his body no longer followed the rhythm it once knew, that his mind might still feel flickers of desire, but his body refused to translate them? One night, lying in bed, he remembered what his doctor had said in passing. There may be side effects. At the time, Daniel had nodded without asking questions. Now he opened his laptop and typed antidepressants and sex drive into the search bar. Page after page confirmed what he was experiencing. Words like delayed ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, and loss of libido stared back at him. He scrolled through forums filled with men describing the same quiet frustration. Hours of trying without release, feeling numb instead of alive, intimacy turning into a performance of effort instead of passion. The knowledge gave Daniel relief. He wasn't broken after all, not in the way he feared. But it also deepened his frustration. If this was a side effect, how long would it last? Would he ever feel normal again? He tried talking to his doctor, stumbling over the words, his face hot with embarrassment. The doctor nodded knowingly, explaining that many antidepressants affected sexual function. It's common, he said gently, and it doesn't mean you're permanently damaged. They discussed options, adjusting the dose, switching medications, or adding something to counteract the side effect. Daniel left the appointment with mixed feelings. On the one hand, it felt good to be heard. On the other, it didn't erase the daily struggle. Even with adjustments, the problem didn't vanish overnight. Some weeks were better, some worse. The hardest part was intimacy with himself. What had once been a private comfort turned into a test of patience he often failed. He would start with hope, only to end in anger or exhaustion. Sometimes he swore he could feel his climax just out of reach, like a door he couldn't quite open. Other times his body seemed unresponsive altogether, as if someone had turned down the volume on his desire. Daniel realized his frustration wasn't just physical, it was emotional. He missed feeling spontaneous, alive, connected to his own body. Depression had already stolen so much of that, and now the very thing that was supposed to help him live again seemed to take something else. He found himself asking, what is sex drive really, if medication can dull it so completely? Was it simply biology, or was it tied to something deeper about who he was? Slowly, Daniel began reframing how he thought about intimacy. Instead of measuring his worth by how quickly or easily he could perform, he started exploring touch without pressure. Some days he lay in bed with no goal at all, just trying to notice small sensations, teaching his body to feel again without expectation. Other days he journaled about his frustration, giving shape to the anger instead of letting it fester. He still struggled, often, but he also learned to talk about it more openly with close friends. To his surprise, some admitted they had gone through the same thing. One friend said, "Man, I thought I was the only one. I almost quit my meds because of it." Hearing that made Daniel feel less alone, less cursed. Months later, Daniel began dating someone new. At first, he avoided intimacy, afraid of what would happen. But eventually, he decided to be honest. He told her about his medication, about how it affected him. He expected her to walk away. Instead, she listened, nodded, and kissed him gently. "We'll figure it out together," she said. That night, intimacy wasn't about finishing. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about presence, connection, and patience. For the first time since starting his medication, Daniel felt a spark of hope that his sex drive wasn't gone. It had just changed, and maybe he could learn to live with that change. Over time, he discovered that desire wasn't only about erections or orgasms. It was also about closeness, laughter, the warmth of another body, the trust of being seen fully, even in struggle. And while the frustration never vanished completely, it no longer defined him. Daniel came to understand that sex drive wasn't a single switch that turned on or off. It was a spectrum, influenced by mood, health, medication, and the stories he told himself. The antidepressants dulled one part of it, yes, but they also gave him back his will to live. And that, he realized, mattered more. He still missed the ease he once had, the way his body had worked before. But he no longer saw himself as broken. He saw himself as a man learning to adapt, to find intimacy in new ways, to accept that sex drive is more complex than he had ever imagined. Word count, 1112. Do you want me to keep this story as a personal character narrative like Daniel's, or would you like me to reframe it into something more memoir style and reflective, as if someone is directly telling their own story?